Pontius Pilate was just kind of he was just there. It was just I guess a Friday morning for him, who knows what he had got going on that day and what plans he had. And early that morning, he gets called to work, and he's like, what's the deal? And crowds are going crazy, and it's so easy for us to just kind of go with the crowds as well. What is everybody else doing? And if everybody else wants this, then why wouldn't I want it? Whatever the culture wants, whatever, what's going on now, that's what I'm fine with. Because again, we don't want to go against the grain. We don't want to stand out, and we want to be cool. If you're younger, that might be something you would say. And but at the end of the day, is our decision to crucify Christ or not? Which, every year I always think about that. It's something that always strikes me when we read the Passion is when we're yelling, "Crucify Him, crucify Him," and it's because anytime I've went to whatever jail or prison to visit the prisoners, I always think to myself, what really separates like someone like myself and these guys, and it's like not much, whatever bad decisions they've made or whatever's happened in their life has caused them to be here, but what we would call that is obviously a societal sin, but we're all sinners. And every time I think about that, I was like, we all deserve to, in some form or fashion, to be in jail because of what we've done. And we're all sinners. And we're all in the crowd yelling, "Crucify Him." Like, I think sometimes maybe when we're reading that or when we're chanting that, we think, well, it's not me. I'm not the one yelling, "Crucify." I would never crucify Christ. And it's like, no, I think we'd all been in the crowd that day yelling, "Crucify Him." I mean, only a few people were there at the end not yelling it. His mother, Mary Magdalene, Mary Clopas, and John, right? There's just a handful of people that were actually there with him at the end. All the rest of them had betrayed him and left and denied him. And everybody else was yelling, "Crucify Him." So I think sometimes we imagine, not me, I would never do that. We'd be more the Peter's role where I won't do that, Lord. But we all do it all the time because of our sin. So that strikes me every year when we read that. And everybody in the crowd, of course, is saying, "Crucify Him, crucify Him." I'm like, yes, this is right. We're all yelling to crucify Him. And again, He still goes to that cross for people that that don't deserve it. We don't deserve it. But again, that's what love is. Love, personified and lived right there on that cross.
I think the other thing to realize too about Pontius Pilate is that he had no skin in the game. He was basically committing the sin of indifference. He had had no real encounter with the divine. His whole strategy was just a political gain. Here he was just governor of that area, trying to keep the peace within the Roman Empire, kind of the emperor's representative in that area. And here he is, he's like, I've got these crowds, or what's going to keep the most peace? So it's all just kind of a game to him, and he's trying to just do his best to kind of sift through that. And so, okay, if we put an innocent man up to death, and we got to realize too, he wasn't Jewish. He was a religious man. He's the one that told the Jews, say, hey, by the way, this is your law. You said that we need to release to you one of your prisoners. And so what do they say? Here's Barabbas. Okay, we're going to put Christ in his place. And so, and again, it's a sin of indifference on Pontius Pilate's part. It was a political game. Okay, what's going to get him the most points with the emperor? What's going to get him to stand out in this area in which he's overseeing? And there's a temptation a lot of times as leaders, whether it be in the corporate world or maybe even in the church and our families, is the sin of indifference, and that a lot of times, as the fathers of the church remind us, that can be one of the greater sins of all, because again, we're not putting any kind of rationality into what's really going on in the world. We're not really looking at it through the eyes of our faith, through the eyes of how God has formed us, how the church has formed us, and there's a big temptation to fall into that as well. So we hear every year on Good Friday the Passion narratives from John's Gospel. And it's very similar to the Passion in the Synoptic Gospels. There's a few added elements or some that are things that are kind of emphasized in John's Gospel. But that's just the way the church has it set up primarily.
We do an interactive at St. Joe. So we have a worship aid, and so I have my parts. Deacon Larry always is always the narrator, and then the people have their parts, and then there's always also a voice. So we always get 4 people to kind of do an interactive section. So, in years past, I always told everybody just sit down and just listen. But the last couple of years I haven't done that. We just remain standing, because we are technically reading the gospel. So It doesn't take too long when you think about it. If you just, it helps you to kind of, it's another little sacrifice, I guess, you can make. While Christ, of course, gives his life, we can sacrifice a few minutes of some achy knees or tired legs or whatever the case may be. And so that's how we do it here at St. Joe. It can just be read by the deacon or whoever as well, just that way too. So. But, I've already spoken a little bit about it in terms of, we do the liturgy of the word, and then we don't do a liturgy of the Eucharist. We do the veneration of the cross.
So those three main components of Holy Week are the Sacred Triduum with our liturgies. It's supposed to be one continuous liturgy. You'll notice at the end of Holy Thursday and the end of Good Friday, we process out merely in silence. There's no final blessing at the end of Mass. The final blessing of the Triduum actually comes at the very end of Mass on the Easter Vigil. And so we begin Mass at the sign of the cross on Holy Thursday, and we don't really make it again until Sunday morning, if you come then. So it's supposed to be one continuous liturgy, really. And so where Holy Thursday kind of drops off in the Garden of Gethsemane, it kind of picks up the next day with Good Friday as the priest comes in complete silence, him and the deacons, they prostrate themselves on the floor, kind of representing them laying down their lives just as the Lord did, wearing red vestments symbolizing that blood that was shed for the life of the world, and then getting up and then go straight and doing the opening prayer, the collect for Good Friday, and then going straight into the liturgy of the Word. And then again, on Holy Saturday, we're filled with that darkness because we start in just a complete darkness. That's why we can't start till 8 o'clock at night.
Well, before you get to the Easter Vigil, too, we can't forget that on Good Friday, there is no liturgy of the Eucharist. So there is no liturgy of the Eucharist, as you said. There's just a liturgy of the Word where, again, we read a different version of the Passion. There's the veneration of the cross. Again, that gives everybody the opportunity to come forward and venerate the cross. People do that with a kiss. They can, of course, genuflect. They can touch the cross, whatever they want to do. The priests come without their shoes on. The reason I bring it up is because it's specific to the priest. The priest is supposed to do it, but a lot of other people come up and they take their shoes off. And I'm always like, well, it's technically supposed to be specifically for the priest. But that's okay. If you want to come up without your shoes on, that's fine. But we do veneration of the cross. And then after the veneration of the cross, you go straight into the distribution of communion. So you'll see the deacon generally leave. Jesus is usually reposed in we do it in our parish hall, but it's in a different area. It's more a chapel or something where he'll bring communion into the church, which usually we consecrate a bunch of hosts on Holy Thursday so that we can give communion on Good Friday. So then he brings that in, we distribute communion. And then basically that's about it. We'll do one little prayer and then we process out, as you said, in silence. And then Easter Vigil starts. It says technically it's supposed to start at sundown here in Kentucky. That's generally in April around 8 o'clock or so, 7:30, 8 o'clock. So that's why we do the Easter Vigil. I think we have people every year show up at 4 o'clock for the normal Saturday 4 o'clock Mass. But again, it's the Triduum, it's Easter. Things are a little bit different, and so we can't start until sundown, which again we do at 8 o'clock.